I like the title for this one, but given what it's about, instead of Le Carré, wouldn't James Thurber have been a more appropriate reference? The Secret Life of Dr. Diddy, perhaps? Because he likes to sing? This is a review of the Star Trek Voyager episode Tinker Tenor Dr. Spy. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what an absolute freak the Doctor is, in his own imagination anyway, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. That was The Secret Life of Dr. Ditty, just to be clear. Ditty with a T, not Diddy with a D. He ain't that much of a freak. Speaking of our hero, the episode begins with the Doctor giving a recital for the crew in the mess hall. His performance of La Donna Immobile goes over well. Everyone seems to be enjoying it. Okay, Tuvok's enjoying it a little too much. Tom's like, "Hey, Tuvok, buddy, you okay?" And Tuvok's like, "Don't fucking touch me! What, I'm not allowed to cry? At opera?" Tuvok throws a bit of a tantrum and Janeway's like, "Security! Come get your boss. He's about to go off." The Doctor steps in immediately to calm down the situation. He realizes that Tuvok is suffering from an acute case of the Vulcan space hornies and distracts him by continuing to sing his aria with cleverly customized lyrics like, "Tuvok, don't be a fool. I know your balls are full. Your testes bulge and thrum with 7 years of cum." And that gives Tom enough time to put together a hypo spray, which he then tosses to the Doctor so the Doctor can put Tuvok's horny ass on the fucking floor. Everyone applauds, and right when we're starting to wonder what the long-term solution for Tuvok's 7-year fuck fever situation will be, like, are the others gonna have to draw straws or what? It turns out none of this was real. It was all the Doctor's daydream. B'Elanna walks into the Doctor's office to shake him back to reality and to give him some bad news. That away mission he was looking forward to going on? Yeah, he's off the roster. Planet looks safe. No reason to bring the Doctor along. Sorry, stay on the ship where you belong, you holographic chump. Cut to the bridge, where the crew has noticed a nebula that has seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Sensors didn't detect it until a few minutes ago. Seems like a pretty alarming anomaly to me. Nebulae don't just blip into existence like that. I'm assuming. I don't actually know. I wasted my life watching television and learned precious little about the actual workings of whatever this all is. Anyway, Chakotay's like, "Never mind that unexplained insta-nebula. Look at this. The Doctor has filed a personnel complaint. He's pissed about being kicked off of that away team, and he has some demands. Acknowledge his sentience, stop being rude to him, and oh yeah, make him the captain in case of an extreme emergency." Janeway's like, "Why does he have to be such a hard-on? Haven't I already acknowledged his sentience, forgotten about that, and gone back to treating him like a microwave, then remembered and acknowledged his sentience again like 3 times by now? What more does he want?" As Janeway goes to her office to write a response to the Doctor's complaint, we move inside that mysterious nebula, where it turns out there is a ship being operated by these Vogon-esque gentlemen, one of whom has been observing Voyager. That guy's boss walks up like, "I thought I told you not to waste any more resources on monitoring that ship." But the other guy, apparently in the script, his name is Phlox, which is obviously a name somebody liked, so let's go with that. Phlox says, "This ship doesn't appear in any of our databases, but if I can figure out a way to scan through its hull, we can learn about its tactical systems and determine if it would make a good target for this, whatever this is we're doing. Also, I've already gone over your head and asked your bosses, the hierarchy, for permission, and hey, look at that, they just approved my proposal. Suck on it." Back on Voyager, the Doctor is in a meeting with the rest of the senior staff, and the ladies are all super into him. B'Elanna is next to him playing footsie. Seven is texting him from across the table like, "You up for it with me?" And then Captain Janeway is faking an injury as an excuse to put the Doctor's hand on her ass. Just as Janeway and B'Elanna are about to start throwing hands Dynasty style, the real Janeway snaps the Doctor out of this daydream and wants to talk about his complaint and his demand to be made emergency captain. She's like, "You should know your limits. You're the Doctor. Your job is in sickbay, not commanding the ship on the bridge." The doctor says, I'm just saying you should make me the emergency command hologram as well as the emergency medical hologram, so that if something happens and the rest of the crew is incapacitated, I'll have the authority to take over. Janeway's like, no, but I'll pass along your idea to Starfleet when we get back to the Alpha Quadrant in another 60 years or whatever it is now. The doctor goes straight from that frustrating meeting into another daydream, one where he has been granted his request and given the position of emergency command hologram. There's a party with champagne, and the babes are still into him, and then we see that this party, this daydream of a party, is somehow being observed by Vogon Phlox on that Vogon ship. Vogon Phlox explains to his still skeptical boss that, because the doctor is a computer program, he's been able to tap into the doctor's perceptions. They can observe Voyager through the doctor's eyes and learn everything they need to know. Vogon Phlox has already learned some important stuff, like, for example, that Voyager is from the other side of the galaxy and is lost and alone in this quadrant. The boss is intrigued by that, and he tells Vogon Phlox to keep up his surveillance. Back on Voyager, the away team leaves on their mission, and the doctor is stuck monitoring them from the bridge. He slips into another daydream. This time, the Borg appear out of nowhere to attack Voyager with an assimilation virus. We're becoming drones, says Chakotay. Thanks for the update, buddy. Well, now there's no choice. The doctor steps forward and declares, "Computer, activate the emergency command hologram." And his uniform turns from blue to red, and the captain's rank pips appear on his collar, and he's like, "Hey Borg, eat shit! Computer, activate the photonic cannon!" The photonic cannon fires, and the Borg ship is instantly destroyed. Vogon Phlox is watching that like, holy shit, what was that? And his buddy says, relax, this is Voyager. They blow up Borg ships all the time. It's not that big of a deal. The boss is skeptical again. He's like, if they just blew up a Borg ship, why aren't we detecting any debris? Vogon Phlox says, because they blew it up that much. There was nothing left. We should be extra cautious when we approach Voyager and make a Type 3 stealth assault. The boss asks his bosses, the hierarchy, and they say go for it. Meanwhile, that latest daydream of the doctor's kinda got out of hand. He was so engrossed in his fantasy that he got distracted while monitoring the away team, and the rest of the crew noticed. Then he's walking down the hall when Chakotay approaches him and congratulates him on how he handled those Borg just now. This isn't the real Chakotay. The doctor's daydreams are starting to intrude on his real life. He goes straight to engineering and tells B'Elanna, Harry, and Seven what's happening. My fantasies are becoming hallucinations that occur whether I want them to or not, the doctor says. I altered my program to give myself the ability to daydream, but I accidentally made myself schizophrenic. The doctor has another fantasy that has him trying to eject the warp core, and Harry and Seven grab him and drag him off to sickbay and put him behind a force field where he can't hurt himself. While the doctor is safely in sickbay, B'Elanna sends his fantasies to the holodeck so they can study them for clues to how to help him and also invade his privacy. Janeway joins B'Elanna, Harry, and Seven on the holodeck, and they observe a series of rapidly shifting doctor daydreams. There's painting Seven like one of his French girls. There's another run-through of the emergency command hologram scene. There's the doctor breaking things off with B'Elanna and sending her back to the loving arms of Tom, who is waiting hilariously close by. Harry and B'Elanna, the real B'Elanna, get an idea for how to fix the doctor, and as everyone is on their way out of the holodeck, Janeway catches a little bit of the doctor's fantasy emergency command hologram party. "Thank you for this opportunity, Captain," he says. "All I ever wanted was to live up to my full potential, to hone all my skills, expand my abilities, to help the people I love." Janeway's like, what is this emotion I'm feeling? Is it empathy? Compassion? But he's just a computer program. Do I have chatbot psychosis? Over on the Vogon ship, they're planning their attack on Voyager based on Vogon Phlox's observations of the Doctor, and Vogon Phlox is nervous. After the boss walks away, Vogon Phlox turns to his buddy and says, "Oh dude, I'm so fucked. I just figured out that I haven't been monitoring the Doctor's perceptions of the real world. I've been monitoring his dreams. None of our information is accurate. When the boss finds out, I'm so fired." The Doctor is feeling better, though a little depressed and embarrassed. B'Elanna figured out how to turn off his daydreams. Janeway drops by and assures him that no one has lost respect for him because they saw some of his fantasies. "We all daydream," she says. The Doctor's like, "Yeah, but I bet your daydreams aren't as mortifying as mine." Janeway's like, "Dude, I have realistic fantasies about murdering every single person on this ship on a constant basis." "Really?" "I'm hanging Harry by a noose braided from his own guts right now, in my imagination." Janeway tells the Doctor to sit tight until they can figure out a way for him to daydream safely. But not long after, while working in sickbay, the Doctor realizes to his horror that one of his fantasies is starting up again. It's the emergency command hologram party, only this time Vogon Phlox is there too. He explains that he has tapped into the Doctor's fantasy in order to secretly communicate with him. He tells the Doctor all about his secret monitoring of his daydreams. The Doctor's not happy about that, and about the pending attack on Voyager. The thing is, now they're both screwed, because Voyager is a target, and also if his bosses find out that he made a mistake in his surveillance, Vogon Phlox is going to lose his job. Also, Vogon Phlox likes the Doctor, and he doesn't want anything bad to happen to him. "Aw, Vogon Phlox, you big softy." Literally, from the looks of it. "I bet you go hee-hee like the Pillsbury Doughboy when somebody pokes you in the belly, don't you? Don't you?" That's probably offensive. I apologize. The Doctor heads to the bridge to warn the crew about the imminent attack, but Janeway's like, "There you go again selling wolf tickets. I told you to stop daydreaming." But the Doctor is able to show Harry how to detect the cloaked incoming Vogon ships so everybody knows he's telling the truth. The Doctor tells Captain Janeway that his new friend, Vogon Phlox, is willing to share the phaser frequencies of their ships so Voyager can defend against them, but in return, so that his bosses don't discover that he goofed on his surveillance, when Voyager engages with the Vogon ships, the Doctor has to be in command. While a nervous Doctor is being prepared to pretend to be the captain, Vogon Phlox's boss decides that Voyager is too dangerous for a Type 3 assault and orders them to prepare for a Type 4 assault, which is worse. When the ships get close enough, Vogon Phlox sends the Doctor a secret message to warn him. The phaser frequencies will be rotating now, so Voyager won't be able to block them as easily. With Janeway still secretly in command and feeding the Doctor instructions from another part of the ship, the Doctor steps up and talks to the Vogon boss. He's like, "Back off or we'll defend ourselves. I won't let you take the ship, not over my dead body, not over all our dead bodies." Well, okay, probably at that point I won't have a choice, but Janeway's like, "Just fucking say what I tell you to say." Tuvok identifies a potential weakness in the shields of the enemy ships, so Chakotay tells the Doctor to keep the Vogons busy while they modify the phasers. The Doctor's like, "I know just what to do. Appeal to their hypochondria." He tells the Vogon leader that the anger he's displaying right now is bad for his vascular pressure, and he'd better see a doctor right away if... Oh, shit, the phasers are ready. That didn't take long at all, did it? Voyager fires phasers, but the Vogons fire back, and suddenly Voyager's phasers are offline. The Vogon boss is like, "Prepare to be boarded." But the Doctor says, "No, I've got a better idea. Tuvok, arm the photonic cannon." Reluctantly, Tuvok pretends to arm the photonic cannon. The Doctor says, "I'd rather not destroy you, but I will. The Borg, your hierarchy, it's all the same to me. You'll be just another bully who didn't know when to back off." Vogon Phlox leans into the boss and says, "The photonic cannon destroyed the Borg. We'd better just retreat." The boss asks the hierarchy, and the message comes back, "Yeah, retreat." So they retreat. Yay! The Doctor won his first battle. Later, the Doctor walks in on another party in honor of him, only this one is the real deal. Janeway gives him an award and tells him she's authorized a research project to explore making him the emergency command hologram for real. You've authorized a research project? What's that mean? You told Harry and B'Elanna to look into it during their spare time, a research project? Like there's some major scientific think tank on Voyager that's going to get right on this? A research project. Anyway, Seven kisses the Doctor on the cheek and says that was a friendly kiss, not a let me go get naked so you can paint my portrait kiss, and that's the end. This episode is a good example of how a good enough writer can take just a whole handful of inspirations and smash them all together into something that works. The title is a John le Carré reference. The premise is a riff on The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. There are also shades of a couple of TNG episodes, as was frequently the case on Voyager. In this case, Phantasms, the one where Data begins dreaming, and Hollow Pursuits, the first appearance of Lieutenant Barclay. And it's also a Doctor episode that returns to some of the recurring themes surrounding that character, including his tensions with Captain Janeway over his personhood and autonomy, and his desire to transcend his original purpose. That's a lot of influences. Plus, the bit with the alien monitoring the Doctor from the other ship that develops into its own little story. And yet all of this mostly hangs together and makes for a pretty good, pretty entertaining episode. As the Starfleet Academy series has recently demonstrated, you can't go wrong putting Robert Picardo front and center. I've reviewed a couple of Doctor-centric episodes already in this batch, and if it wasn't obvious already, it certainly is now. The Doctor is Voyager's best character, and he is the focal point of some of the show's best episodes. While I wouldn't count this one among the very best, it's above average for the series, and it benefits greatly from both the Doctor's character and Picardo's performance. Some of the Doctor's character arc is borrowed from Data on TNG. He's an artificial life form who strains against his limitations, who has to fight to be recognized as a person, not merely a piece of technology, and who occasionally tinkers with his own programming in ways that cause hijinks to ensue. But the Doctor manages to take those familiar concepts and make them his own. He is very unlike Data in some important ways. He doesn't look like an ageless plastic android. He looks like a middle-aged man. He is cynical and sarcastic rather than innocent. He, like Data, is sometimes baffled by human nature, but not in the same way. He understands why people act the way they do, and he's more likely to roll his eyes and shake his head at their behavior than to want to study and emulate it. Also, unlike Data, at least Data as we see him during TNG's 7 seasons, the Doctor has feelings. He has an emotional life, a capacity for love and anger. He has an ego. He has pride. When he is disrespected, he doesn't just register it, he feels it, and he yearns. We see that beneath the misanthropic surface of his personality, there is the heart of someone vulnerable. Someone who wants to improve himself, someone who wants to connect with others, someone who has unexpectedly been given a life and wants to live it. There's also a ridiculousness about him, a pomposity that allows him to slide between being a tragic and poignant character and being a really goddamn funny character with an ease that can be very impressive. Picardo is one of those actors equally gifted with facilities for pathos and comedy. Those skills are essential in this episode because if Picardo wasn't so good at making the Doctor look buffoonish at the right times, some of this episode would read as creepy rather than comedic. The Doctor's daydreams seemingly break down into two main categories: power fantasies and sex fantasies. This reads as genuine to me because my daydreams break down the exact same way. As we see throughout this episode, the Doctor is either fantasizing about being promoted, being acknowledged for his greatness, being called upon to save the ship because he's the only one who can, or fantasizing about all the ladies panting after that holographic horsecock he programmed himself to have. He's like a young Eddie Murphy walking around with pussy falling out his pockets and shit. Only he doesn't have pockets, so I guess he's just carrying it. which wouldn't be a problem. Presumably, the doors open by themselves. Anyway, the scenes of the Doctor daydreaming about Seven of Nine texting him to arrange a hookup, or B'Elanna and Janeway fighting over him, or Seven posing nude for him, are pitched to be funny rather than sexy, and that's important, because otherwise I'm not sure we could watch them and still think of the Doctor as a good guy. It's true that, as Janeway says at one point, everybody daydreams, and I don't think any of us would like to be judged on our private thoughts and fantasies, but it's one thing to know in theory that everybody indulges in fantasy from time to time, and quite another to find out firsthand that the Doctor is frequently daydreaming about women who are superior officers on the ship wanting to jump his photonic bones. Or should I say bone? The Doctor gets away with it because Picardo is so good at selling the comedy, and the comedy renders it non-threatening and inoffensive, or at least inoffensive enough. You might think, damn, fantasizing about painting a nude portrait of Seven of Nine isn't great, but then you see the Doctor in that hat and painter smock, and you think, oh, okay, it's a cartoon, this is fine. Same thing with the scene where the Doctor fantasizes about breaking up with B'Elanna. Is it a demonstration of how egotistical he is to imagine himself trying to nobly let B'Elanna down easy while she's still begging to be with him? Sure. But it's presented in such a way that it plays as ridiculous rather than toxic. And God, I love that cut to Tom sitting nearby and waving hopefully at B'Elanna. It just works. There's a tightrope that needs to be walked, and Robert Picardo walks it, and it works. Crucially, the comedic elements don't undermine the more serious elements. The Doctor's sincere desire to evolve, to acquire new skills, to prove to his friends that he has value, and to be of maximum service to the ship and the crew comes across. He sometimes appears buffoonish, but ultimately he is not a buffoon. He has hopes and dreams and insecurities that are relatable to all of us. Anchored securely to the Doctor and to Robert Picardo's dramatic and comedic chops, the episode unspools its story at a good pace that doesn't drag and doesn't get lost in the weeds when it's time to enter another of the Doctor's daydreams. The concept and the plot are very similar to things previously seen on TNG, like I said. Data's dreams intruding into reality, Barclay's embarrassing holodeck fantasies being revealed to the crew, but there are enough original elements that feel specific to this story, and particularly to the Doctor, that the episode doesn't play like a retread. It's more like a conceptual remix, and a good one. One of the strongest elements of the episode is the story that takes place aboard the alien ship. The design of the aliens does remind me a lot of the Vogons as they looked in the classic 1980s TV version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but beyond the appearance, they aren't very Vogon-like. The episode tells us a lot about them in a very short amount of time with little or no exposition. I love the idea of the hierarchy, how these guys are basically just low-level middle manager types, and they're constantly having to run things by their unseen bosses. I like the little cards they use to communicate with the hierarchy, the way they type stuff into the cards and then stick them in slots and wait for the answer. It's a nice visual bit of business that requires no explanation. They're some of the best aliens the creators of Voyager were able to come up with, and the main one we follow in this episode, Phlox, played by Jay Leggett, turns into a pretty sympathetic character by the end. His mistake in observing the Doctor's daydreams when he thinks he's seeing what life is really like on Voyager is a clever added complication and imparts a farcical element to the show, which I enjoy, and his decision to help the Doctor save Voyager from attack rings true, both as a desperate act of self-preservation and also an effort to protect the Doctor. When Phlox tells the Doctor, "I don't want you to be harmed," I believe him. In one respect, Phlox and the Doctor aren't that different. They've both been assigned to specific, narrow tasks. They're both expected to carry out their duties and be satisfied with that, and they're not satisfied with that. But the Doctor is doing something about it. The Doctor can do something about it. When Phlox says to the Doctor, "I admire you," that's what he's talking about. Not the Doctor's programming or his skill or his intellect, but his imagination, his ability to dream, and his willingness to push against his limitations. That connection between Phlox and the Doctor is clear when you watch the episode, but it's never underlined. It's just there for us to notice. And when I did notice it, I thought it was a very nice piece of writing. Speaking of which, Tinker, Tenor, Dr. Spy was written by Joe Menosky from a story by Bill Vallely and directed by John Bruno. Joe Menosky was a very prolific and long-serving writer and producer whose contribution to Star Trek spanned multiple series and even multiple production eras of the franchise. He started on TNG, worked on Deep Space Nine and Voyager, then returned to write and produce during the first season of Star Trek Discovery. He's the 47 guy, the writer who started inserting the number 47 into his scripts. That's how 47 became a thing in Star Trek. It was Joe Menosky. John Bruno directed 2 other episodes of Voyager, including another Doctor episode, Lifeline. Tinker, Tenor, Dr. Spy is not what I would call a classic episode, even for Voyager. There are episodes that are funnier, more entertaining, that make a more powerful point, but not all that many, especially from the show's final 2 seasons. This is a good one, a solid effort that holds my attention, gives me a few chuckles, occasionally impresses me with how thoughtful and smart it is, and reminds me yet again that Robert Picardo is the most versatile member of this team. He's the right one for the job. Tinker, Tenor, Doctor, Spy, and whatever else the creators need him to do. Those are my thoughts on Tinker, Tenor, Dr. Spy. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next week as this Spotlight on Voyager batch continues. Next time, another episode from Season 6, and it's not a Doctor episode. It's a Barclay episode. Why is there such a thing as a Barclay episode of Voyager? We'll talk about that, I'm sure, and many other things when I review the episode, which is called Pathfinder. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching. And take care, everybody.